Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and I often get asked, what do I miss about not being an airline pilot anymore? And I think you might be surprised. I get this question asked a lot, so I decided to put a video on it. Now, as you can imagine, airline pilots are all sorts of different types. So I would ask fellow airline pilots, well, what do you miss about being retired, about not flying airlines anymore? And it was kind of interesting. There was this one captain who I flew with as a co-pilot on the 737-200, and he is an amazing pilot. He has civilian aircraft and he flies. I fly my civilian aircraft now too that I'm retired, but he taught me that the 737-200 flies just like a J3, except you don't ever want to drag the tail. That's not something you want to do, but it's a very nice, honest flying airplane and just a lot of fun to fly. And we had a great time flying. And he retired off the 747-400. I actually know captains who didn't want to advance. They loved flying locally, domestic, and they could have flown 747s, and they took the pay hit and retired off of the 737. Kind of interesting there, but okay. I slightly digressed there, but basically, this one pilot who I flew the 737 with, he said he really missed flying the 747. Well, I flew the 777. I love the 777. I've got quite a background in it with my flight test involvement and ALPA and that, and I really love this airplane. But there comes a time when you have to stop, and yeah, I miss the airplane, but that's not the main thing I miss about airline flying. I'll tell you here. There's another group of people that kind of surprised me that when they set the parking brake for the final time, they're done. They don't have any small airplanes. They're not involved in general aviation. They never get in the cockpit of anything again. And I think that's kind of sad, because I think as an airline pilot you should really enjoy flying. Now the fun thing about this, there was one 727 captain I flew with, and I got discussing with him. He was probably one of the best 27 captains I had ever flown with, and I think I was the flight engineer. And this is early on in my career. And I asked him, about did he have little airplanes, liking to fly, stuff like that. He said he absolutely hated to fly. It was a job. That's all it was to him. And I thought, boy, talent's really been wasted. And I've known a few other people like that. I thought, if you don't love flying, get out of the way and let somebody who loves flying into this job, because obviously, it's kind of a strong word, but if you don't love to fly, you're, in my opinion, not worthy of being an airline pilot. This has to be your thing. You got to love it. Otherwise, you're just a bit of a prostitute. Although people can argue that airline pilots are. But anyway, digressing. Well, let's talk about how my airline career proceeded. I was very fortunate. I had been a ham radio operator, still am, extra class in that, KC0ZN. But I had a very high up in ALPA individual I talked through all during the furlough on the ham radio. And we talked about my background and stuff like that. So when I came back, he pushed very strongly for me to get on the ALPA National New Aircraft Committee. And at the time, because of the crew complement issue, this was a presidential committee. This committee reported directly to the president of ALPA, which was unusual. And of course, United Airlines, 6,000 plus pilots. Who do they send to be on the committee out of all those 6,000 pilots? They send a 727 second officer. Does that make a lot of sense? I'm sure there were more qualified people, but this guy liked me, and he was in a political position. And yeah, I'm a slow learner on politics. I'll talk about that in a few other aspects here when I cover a few different things. But yeah, I was not a good politician, and yeah, that probably hurt me quite a bit. But I was involved on the technical side, and I was chairman of several national technical committees for a long time, and worked with IFALP and stuff like that. But I spent 13 years on the 777, and I thoroughly enjoyed this aircraft, as I had mentioned, and I was involved in a lot of the initial aspects of it. Here's me flying some early flight test profiles on the 777, and it's we got some flight test instrumentation up there on the glare shield, as you can see, and that's John Cashman, the chief test pilot on the 777. And of course, 777 was a very interesting aircraft for me to fly because I was currently a captain on the 727, so I was doing quite a bit of a technological jump here. And it was interesting, though. I got my name on. Boeing got awarded the Collier Trophy for their work on the 777, and you get an extra little Collier Trophy plaque that you can put everybody's name on that was involved, and they recognize ALPA for our work on. I led also the Working Together group for ALPA, and my name is on the upper right-hand corner of that little trophy that's in, I think, ALPA headquarters now. I don't have a good picture of it; it's kind of blurry. That was a long time ago. But anyway, I had a lot of fun doing that. Also in the process, I did a lot of technical work, and I wrote a paper that talked about the various flight control systems. I talked about, as an example, the 727, which is a basic flight control type of system. I talk about the more advanced fly-by-wire and the difference in philosophy between Airbus and Boeing. And I submitted my paper to Site Experimental Test Pilots, and they published it, and then I was selected as the Outstanding Technical Paper of the Year, which really surprised me. We got a little letter in the mail, and I thought it was tickets to the banquet, and my wife opens it up and says, "It's not tickets, but you're going to really like this." And then the Aviation Week Laurels thing, which was quite an honor. 1999 was a good year for me. I was partying just like it was 1999. And I'm sitting there reading the Aviation Week Space Technology magazine, and I open it up, and I'm looking at the Laurels Awards, and I come across my name. And I go, "Chris," that's my wife, Chris. I go, "Chris, look at this." It was a total shock. I guess I had a phone call from the editor, Mr. North, asking me a few questions about my paper and the work I had done and stuff like that. But not being the political guy, I didn't put two and two together until the magazine came out, and this was in there. Quite a surprise. And there's at the Society of Experimental Test Pilots getting presented the award, and that's my lovely wife holding it. And like I said, one of the fun things I got to do was just a lot of involvement with flight test research on commercial aircraft. And, one of the things I'm going to miss is all the fancy dinners in Seattle and Toulouse. And there were other unique opportunities, like McDonnell Douglas, before they merged with Boeing, was building the C-17, and they wanted to sell it as the MD-17 because this was the only aircraft other than the Aleutians, and we're not getting along with the Russians so well anymore, are we? But this was the only other aircraft other than the Russian aircraft that could carry the 777 engine fully together. Otherwise, they had to break it down into pieces to fit in a cargo hold. And the other thing is, and this is now in this Seattle Museum of Flight there, the Boeing 247, I got a chance to fly that. And I was told I'm the only non-Boeing test pilot that has ever gotten to fly both of these aircraft, the 777 and the 247. And of course, the 247 back in the 30s, there's quite a story about that. And I did a flight evaluation on it, and I'll write that up later. In fact, that's kind of the end one because that's the last one I did. But they wondered, boy, back in 1930s, could you ever get 10 people who all wanted to go the same place at the same time? Well, you know what? I think you can. And I taught my son to fly. And now he's a 777 pilot at United, and went around. I did his IOE, his initial operating experience. So that, of course, was a great fun thing to do, and extremely enjoyable. But there was one of the legs when my wife came along on it also. And there's me when I'm actually now for real getting checked out in the 777. I'm on my way to Frankfurt on my first international trip. And my son kind of wondered, well, will you really like international? You spent your whole career flying domestically. And I ended up with 25 years as captain, the last 13 on the 777. And he goes, will you really like, flying internationally? He wasn't sure I would, but actually I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the reason is, just the layovers, the cruise, the fun. I did a lot of hauling the troops around. We did these military charters, and we would have a dedicated group of flight attendants, and we'd have some extra time over in Frankfurt. That was kind of our staging area. We'd come from a military base in the States, would fly to Frankfurt, then we'd go on to either Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, and sometimes a number of times secret bases. It's kind of interesting. I've got my map, and I put a little box around where we were going, the Latin longitude, because there's nothing on the map. And of course, I'll go to Google Earth and see it. Well, those are the places that are blurred out that you can't see. And this base, Rumsfeld disclosed it the day I actually landed there for the last time. And it was absolutely huge base. But yeah, that was one of the fun things. And there's a picture of my 777. We were taxiing out, and I took a quick shot of it because this building always reflected. So that's me. That's my 777. And here's the crew again. We had some time in Frankfurt, so we went on a wine tour. And they have this ice wine that I guess you have a freeze, and they can only harvest it. I mean, like it's all done. They have to harvest the grapes on one day of the year for this special wine. So we went on a little wine tour around Frankfurt, and there we're having our wine tasting, and of course we're getting to see the various aspects around Frankfurt. And we go up to this castle up on the hill there. And it had a little sign in German. We have no idea what it meant, but I later showed it to some German-speaking people, and they said, yeah, it basically says no trespassing. So fortunately, that little gate didn't come down on top of us. And of course, it's just a fun group, you know. That's one thing. Okay, the thing I miss more than anything is the people. I miss working with my fellow employees. I enjoyed the passengers immensely, and we just had a lot of fun time on layovers. And the flight attendants we had on these charters, we had kind of a dedicated group, and it was really nice. We took a lot of the service people in and out, and they did a really good job of decorating the cabin for the service members. And there's a picture with some of them back in first class there, and obviously the lady wearing the helmet, she has heard about my landings before. And on one of the trips, I have this down in my secondary pilot wall. I got them to sign the flag, the troops that I was, this time I was bringing back. And you see the little picture down there. That's getting on the airplane. I think this was in Kuwait. And I was bringing back from there. And then the picture there that my face is on is I was taking a Medal of Honor winner over to Frankfurt to give a presentation to the troops. That was quite an honor. And of course, flight attendants, we got the people, and it was kind of interesting, you know, you can't bring a weapon on the aircraft. Well, let me tell you, they brought their weapons, so we had plenty of weapons on board the aircraft, and we had plenty of ammunition too. I actually thought, can we carry that? Is that hazardous goods? But my son was actually the chairman of the hazardous goods committee, both for United and nationally. And I called him up on the phone and I said, "Are we allowed to carry this?" And he goes, "Yeah." And one thing interesting, going over to Saudi Arabia, an area of the country I previously did not get to go much, there's a little island off of Saudi Arabia. And I went to work out at Edwards Flight Test Center in the Mojave Desert, and I thought that was a desert. But boy, flying over some of these desert regions in this area now, that is really, that really looks like desert. And you can see how the flight attendants decorated the air stairs there for the GIs getting on board with the flags and the balloons. And we were taking them back to the States, and I must say it's kind of like the Vegas crowd. It's a reverse of the Vegas crowd. When I flew people to Vegas, they were happy going out, quiet coming back. When I flew the troops over to these points, it was fairly quiet going out, and much happier, needless to say, coming back. And of course, one of my first trips internationally is we go to Beijing, and because I'm junior, I get the not as well liked trip, which has a 4 day layover in Beijing. But actually, it was a really good trip because we rented a little van and a driver. We had them for the whole day, and the whole thing cost us $100 for the whole thing. So we split it up, and these are my on the far left is my co-pilot. I think the far left are my two co-pilots, and then one of their friends that also came along on the trip. And we went up to see the Great Wall. And one thing about the Great Wall is they have this little toboggan you can ride on the way down. And of course, I read all the instructions in Chinese there to make sure I didn't do anything wrong, as you can see. And I'm sure you look at those and you go, yep, okay, that tells me a lot. And there's another picture at, I think we were at the Forbidden City there going into it. In fact, we almost missed the Forbidden City. It was kind of a mortuary that we saw, and we thought it was the Forbidden City, and we kind of said to each other, boy, if this is Forbidden City, it's really overhyped. And then I noticed out through the corner of my view, and you can't really see it here, but I saw what obviously we recognize as the Forbidden City, and then we got to go through that. It was, and it was worthwhile. And here's a picture of me. I think this is at the cemetery, as it were, and I have no idea what I'm holding there. Another thing that you do, and the reason I didn't bid the 747 is it basically flew Chicago to Tokyo. And after I'd done that a couple times, for me, that was enough. And that's all the 47 flew. So I stayed on the 777. I wish I'd flown the 47, but I stayed on the 777. And this is Green Street in Narita. Now, that's if you go to Tokyo, you land at the airport now that's in Narita. So that's why the identifier is NRT. And this is the Green Street. And we'd make a quick trip over to the Bon, which was kind of interesting. You went up on the second floor, and if you got there early, you could sit around the grill. Best gyoza I've ever had in my life. And for $20, you got all you could eat: chicken, salad, gyoza, and a few other things. A big liter Bass beer. So here I am in Japan. I'm listening to 50s rock and roll music, which is what they're playing. I'm drinking a British beer, supposedly an import, and the people who own it are Filipinos. Very interesting. I hear, though, that it has closed, which is unfortunate because I love that place. And the one thing that China does well is they do weird architecture. I mean, it's really some amazing pieces of structure. Yep, here's another one. I don't remember if this is in... I don't remember. It's either Hong Kong or it's in Shanghai. Shanghai had some of the most interesting architecture. Yeah, and I wonder what your office would look like there. And of course, then we go over to Singapore, and I would tell some of the new flight attendants they get a lot of high water as we were coming up to our hotel. This is near our hotel in Singapore, and I tell the new flight attendants that they get a lot of high water here, and they go, really? And I go, yeah. And then we'd go by this, and I'd point, and you see that ship that ended up on the top of those hotel buildings up there? Yep. And then, of course, the fun thing was, this is a friend of mine for over 35 years. We knew each other way back early. We were both Crystal Lake people, Fred. And I gave him his OE on the 27, and I forget what else. But anyway, he's taken me over to, I think I'm going to Singapore at the end here, but there he is with his co-pilot up in the lounge area, having some of the local cuisine. And here's Hawaii. This is Honolulu, one of my favorite places. This wasn't the hotel we stayed at, but we could go over there and listen to this ukulele player. This woman is the most amazing artist I have ever heard on the ukulele, and it was one of the fun things about the job. And of course, you cannot complain about the view out of your hotel room. I mean, it's going to Hawaii. Now, we'd only stay a day typically, and I'd go over to Hawaii, and I would be there, out on the beach or whatever, and get in a conversation with some of the tourists there, and they say, "Well, how long are you here for?" And I go, "I'm just here for a day." And they go, what? And I said, yeah, it's so nice. I can only stand Hawaii for a day. It's just so beautiful that I come for a day and I go back. But I'm coming back next week. And they go, what? And then I explained to them that, yeah, I'm an airline pilot and I fly this trip a lot. And of course, there we have regulars at the bar. There's Bob in at Honolulu, and he does a mean Mai Tai. And of course, he knows us all very well because we come in there and partake of his bar. And you see the old-fashioned cash register up there. And the fun thing is just your cruise. I mean, I just thoroughly enjoyed the people I work with. Yep, there's Diamond Head in the back, and I don't know what's... That looks like I have a glass of water. Something must be wrong there. That doesn't make sense. Oh, and this flight attendant. She looks at least 10 years younger than she is. I won't tell you how old she is, but she told... I get the manifest, and I can look at her birth date, and I look at that, and I go, you got to be kidding. I don't know if she's had any work done or not, but she is one of the Honolulu people. I mean, that's all she ever flies is Chicago to Honolulu, and these flight attendants, that's their thing. They do a great job. They put on a great service, and she was in amazing condition. And of course, then you do things like you fly to Sydney. Now, my high school had this little promotion where they got this Herky thing, Regina High School, Iowa City. This Herky, what was the thing called? Gosh, I'm having a brain gas dispersal here. It was a Regal thing. Anyway, okay, they had this little contest where they wanted pictures of the most diverse locations, that they had a picture of the mascot. And the deal is you go to some place, you take the picture. Well, guess what? I won this absolutely hands down because there we are in, obviously, Paris. And there is another one of the bars that we frequent in Honolulu there, and you can see the lady behind the bar is just as excited about this mascot as I was. And we're in, I think, Frankfurt here. And of course, you see my co-pilot is still absolutely enamored also. But, I'm racking up points on this contest. And there is me at Tiananmen Square. And there's me at Maui. Okay. You see, this is home. That was I got. I took this shirt. I took this little mascot picture all over the world, and I've got more pictures. I'm not going to bore you with on it. I've probably done that already, but I get this T-shirt. Okay, so I take a picture with me and the mascot back there at Maui, and that's the hotel we stayed at. And then of course they've got this bridge over in Sydney, which is kind of cool. And here we are in Beijing, and up at the bar, or up at the lounge, there is a spacecraft that obviously, like I said again, they do some interesting construction over there. It looks like a spacecraft on top of the building there, and the other side of the picture is at an Irish pub in Sydney. So we had a fun time getting around. And of course, here's my crew. Now, normally we have 3 people going to Europe, and we are in, I think it's the 12 Apostles restaurant, one of the places crews went in Frankfurt. And I've got an extra co-pilot because I'm training. One of these guys is in training, and we're going out and having a wonderful German beer. And there we are having more wonderful German beers. Now, I was a line check airman, and they would schedule me to give check rides, and they would typically try to do, a check ride both ways, but at times they couldn't do it. So here I am in first class on the left there on the 747 with those flight attendants I'd worked with quite a bit, and I'm getting a nice service from Chicago to Hong Kong, a nice almost 18-hour trip, and I'm sitting there in first class, and I'm sitting next to a gentleman who is going to Hong Kong for business or whatever. And I happened to glance down, and he's back when, paper tickets were more ubiquitous. I happened to glance down and see that he paid $25,000, or somebody did, for this first class seat from Chicago to Hong Kong. So I go, That's pretty cool. And here we are in Brussels with a few of the flight attendants there. The one in the center is actually married to one of our captains that I'll show later. And there's Brussels. I mean, they do a good job with the town squares and illuminating the things at night. Okay, here we are over in Beijing, and you get a full all you can eat a Chinese meal, and people said, where's the best Chinese place you had? And I go, in Beijing, and it was called the Brown Door. And when I first went there, I'm looking and I'm seeing, oh yeah, it's well, how do I find it? You know, because I can't read Chinese. Of course, they wouldn't call it in Chinese. They wouldn't call it the Brown Door. But I'm looking there and I see the Brown Door, and then the co-pilot mentions, yeah, and right above it in huge letters is Brown Door. But the one thing they do is they have big beer bottles and they have little beer glasses. Now this is a beer glass. This came from I think Frankfurt. Yeah, it's or Munich. It's got Munich on it, but I think I bought it in Frankfurt. But the Germans know how to have a beer. See, so I can tell. I can say, yeah, honey, I only had one beer. And here we are back in Hawaii. Now, one thing is, I was retired for 6 months before I realized that, I wasn't tired all the time because going back and forth, and I listened to my son. He's going here, he's going there, and all this stuff. And I'll tell you, I was tired all the time and didn't quite realize it. But I was 6 months into retirement when I finally go, I'm not tired all the time. But we got to see some fun parts of the world that, you just don't get to see. Here's very near the North Pole. I've gone over the magnetic North Pole, and I've gone over the geometric North Pole. And, of course, they're two quite a bit distance from each other. And this is going into Beijing, I think. Now, when we'd go to Hawaii, we'd take off, and the takeoff time in that would be such that you were staring at the sun because we're traveling about as fast as the Earth is rotating under us. So we're looking at one spot of the sun, and until we start our descent into Honolulu, Maui, or wherever we're going, the sun doesn't start to descend. But the interesting thing is, and especially with the international dateline, you take off. And you get near Alaska, the sun goes down, the sun comes up then on the trip a little bit later, far into Russia, and then it goes back down. So it's 2 days going out, but it's only 1 day coming back because of the Earth's rotation, it seems like, and the international dateline. So we take off just before coming back from Lake Beijing. We take off just before sunset. It gets dark. The sun usually comes up over Alaska, and then we come in and land, and then it goes under the horizon. And here's the funny thing. Here was a friend of mine that I've known since we were second officers. He's now captain on the 47, and I'm captain on the 777, and I come up underneath him and take a few pictures of his aircraft. And it's a little bit, I use the telephoto, but they still look fairly close. We're 1,000 feet apart, but, even 1,000 feet apart with the reduced vertical separation, it still looks close. And of course, the one thing about it is going over to Europe, we're on the tracks, and you can follow the other guys over. You would never get lost going to Hawaii because you just follow the contrails, and Hawaii from one end to the other is about the size of Alaska, and if you can't hit that dead reckoning, you're doing something wrong. And they have a very strong radio station there that you can home in on the ADF. But going up north, you see a lot of very cold places with a lot of ice and icebergs and that. In fact, I did one trip several trips going from San Francisco to like Frankfurt, and we are so far north over Greenland that there is just nobody else around. And of course, you get to see a lot of the glacier flows. You get to see a lot of places that look very, very cold, and you just want to, you don't want to go down there, and a lot of times there's no place to go. In fact, when we're coming up over the poles, like from Chicago, when we get into Siberia, it seems like you're getting back into civilization, and there basically you just see the little patch of the town on the horizon. Of course, coming into Hawaii is always fun. There's Diamond Head, the surf coming in. Now Beijing. If you want to know about what happens if you don't take air pollution seriously, the smog in Beijing is pretty amazing. In fact, I would have some trips where I would be laying over there several days, and it got to the point with the smog that after the second day, my eyes were burning so bad I was glad to be moving on. And again, here we are having a nice, inexpensive meal in Beijing, and the lady with the cello there photobombing our picture doesn't look quite so happy. But we're having a fun time with a great meal that we had plenty to eat, and it ended up being like $10 each, and that's including, well, you don't tip. That's an insult to tip them, and the drinks. And there's a captain I was giving a check out on the 777, and we're at the layover. Now, Pizza Hut. Oh, America gets around. I remember my very first trip to any place outside of the United States was to Amsterdam. And I get off get out of the taxi there at the hotel, and the first thing I see is a Marriott and a McDonald's, and I'm going, I thought this was Europe. It looks like just back in the States. And there was a Pizza Hut, and actually it was a pretty nice restaurant. It was more of an Italian restaurant with more of a menu than typically Pizza Hut has. And on the right is the Spanish Steps in Rome. And the question got to be in my last year or two, I was flying Rome, and the question was, well, where are we going to eat in Rome this week? Because we go there a lot. But I found out, this is why everybody leaves and goes on vacation and goes down to the French Riviera and that, because it is hot as blazes in Rome and a lot of these cities during the summer. There's my crew checking out a new co-pilot. And there's checking out the new captain again that we were having the beers with there. And of course, the danger of becoming a wide-body captain, they always have Sundays left over from first class, and of course the flight attendants are worried about their figure too. So they end up getting passed up to the cockpit. And there's my captain in training there, as it were, back in casual first class crew rest seat, having a nice meal during our break. And the one thing about these hotels is they had some just amazing facilities. This is the pool in the health club in the hotel we stayed at for a while in Beijing. Yeah, that's the pool. And of course, who's buried in Hadrian's tomb? Well, Hadrian isn't anymore. He's long gone. This is in Rome. And we'd have the Christmas marts in Frankfurt and Munich and that, and you could have the glue vine there. It's made with wine, tastes like glue in my opinion. And there's back in Rome and St. Peter's, and of course outside. And there's the Pantheon, and I got this photograph and you can see me sweat there. It's hot. I wanted this for all the nuns who told me I was going to go to hell, that it actually looks like I have a halo there. So I'm in a Pantheon, religious site, and the halo is shining down on me. And of course, here is the Vatican, and I think they're getting a fresh supply of holy water. Yeah, this is why the nun said I was going to go to hell. And the one thing I don't miss is having to deal with all sorts of weather that is not just being your friend. And of course, we flew a lot, obviously on the backside of the clock at night. And this is what's known as St. Elmo's fire. It's kind of interesting. You see a lot of this. You get static electricity, and you get all these little sparks across the window, and it can be quite interesting. And the funny thing is, the flight attendants will come up, bringing us a drink or something. And some of the new ones will see this, and they get really scared. They go, "What the heck is this?" And then, of course, here is de-icing out of Chicago. And the interesting thing about this, I took a picture of this because they were actually making a video of de-icing aircraft. And so I was taking a picture of them, taking a picture of me, but it's kind of messy, so you can't really see the fact that they're filming this. And of course, the fun thing, if you want to keep up to speed on your Cat 3 Autolands, Frankfurt in the spring was the place to go. There's a hotel off the end of runway 25, the new one, and it was the longest time. You would see it below 800 feet on final. You'd pass right over it. I flew in there many, many times before the weather was clear enough. I mean, I touched down being able to see nothing a few times, which you're legal to do. But it was a long time before I got there on a clear enough day that I could actually see that there was a hotel there. And of course, here is in the Christmas Mart with my crew there having Glühwein. And of course, my captain there that I was training, we're over in Frankfurt this time. We had to get some, enough time in to get them checked out on both directions there. Here we are back at the Vatican. And we're in Maui. This is a nice little Mexican restaurant that was just down from the hotel that we would go out. And this is my crew here. We got an extra pilot again because I'm training somebody. I don't remember who. And this is going into, you'll recognize that, the Sydney Harbor. And I was a line check airman, and we'd have meetings of all the line check airmen, and that's my chief pilot there next to me, who I had known since new hires. We actually shared a new hire crash pad together, and he's the one that I mentioned on the PA about the unfortunate goat incident. I do a video on that in my airline videos, and I told him I never would have done that if I knew that you were going to rise to such prominent as being my chief pilot at O'Hare. This is my last flight, getting ready to retire now, and I really miss the people. I enjoy the people, the little kids, the fun they have coming up into the cockpit. It was kind of funny. After 9/11, people were very, very afraid to actually even approach the cockpit on the ground there, but I encouraged them to come up. And this is where it all started, and I spent 4 decades going to the training center out at Denver. In fact, this place, I don't even recognize it anymore. This building where I spent a lot of the time on the 777 didn't even exist when I first got hired. The facility was much, much smaller. And of course, we had 6,000 pilots. We went up to quite a few before 9/11. And then when we merged to Continental, we're back up to like 13,000 or even more than that. I think I'm out of date on that number. I think it's a ridiculously high number. And of course, I don't have to do bet your ticket on the box anymore. I'm done with my simulator of L's, which is a way you could lose your job. We called it you bet your job. And all those buttons and knobs and things, I don't have to remember what they do anymore. All right, here is my last line check on the 777. I'm done. And I went from having a couple of old codger instructors and check airmen who were Googling the cute little secretaries to now having a woman 777 pilot who is giving me the check ride. Yeah, we've gone full circle here. And of course, United pilots, you will recognize the food simulators here, and that's even changed. You have to order food on an iPad. When I started, of course, none of that existed. And the fun thing, I mentioned the crew members, and we were at Maui here. I met up with one of my original co-pilots when I was a brand new captain on the 737. She flew with me way back then and actually would still talk to me, which is amazing. But she flew with me way back when, and she's now a senior captain. And there's a friend of mine, a Air Force pilot classmate of mine. And the argument about going separate tracks. This guy here was one of the finest formation pilots I'd ever seen in the T-38. I mean, he was solid. And he goes and he flies 141s. That was his choice. We have people who wash out because they can't fly formation. And it's sad because he would have never did fly formation of the type you fly in the 38, pulling 6Gs. You don't do that in 141s, even if you do kind of fly in, sections and stuff like that. And he brought the book because I was the editor of the yearbook for our class. One thing I must comment is I'm glad when I'm going over to Asia that they have English, because I would have absolutely no idea where I was going if I couldn't read the English. And of course, one thing that we do is, we had decent layovers because you have to get the crew rest. And the guy on the left there is married to the flight attendant I mentioned earlier, Jay. I've known Jay for a very long time. And there's the crew. We're setting out in the breakfast lounge. We'd get together for breakfast and have just a nice leisurely breakfast, and then we'd usually go shopping and stuff like that. And there's a little closer picture of me and Jay. And of course, here we are back at Maui. I hope your head isn't spinning on all this. And like I said, I missed the cruise. We had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun times. And there we are in Munich. You recognize the church there in the background and the squares. The town squares were just so much fun. And Oktoberfest, you talk about a festive atmosphere, but you know the Germans are very clever. They have Oktoberfest in September. I think they're trying to fool all of the the Americans. And then, of course, there is a lady who can really hold her beer. I was amazed that these rather diminutive women could carry such an amount of alcoholic beverages. And that's my youngest son and family. They came out with me on my first. I had two back-to-back Maui trips, and I took the family out there, and some had to meet us later. But that's my chief pilot there next to me, who allowed me to stay over a little longer because he flew the trip back, and then I deadheaded back to fly my final trip. And there's my oldest son, who's the airline pilot, now 777 pilot, and he put together a real nice display and got cakes and just did a wonderful job for my retirement. And there is the cake he had put together, and went to a lot of work to get that out to the station. Of course, you have security and stuff like that, and they had to pass it through security, so I had to x-ray the cake, make sure there wasn't a file or anything in there, and then he got it all set up. And there's my last taxi out at Maui, and the whole crew, the agents and the various people came down to wave goodbye to me using their whole hand. Not like when I'm driving in traffic where they don't use their whole hand. No, they use their whole hand. And there's the start of the water cannon salute. My last departure there, and it's kind of interesting. They call it a water lay when you leave out of Hawaii, and the sun hit it just right, and it gave us a beautiful rainbow. And I have this picture on my wall downstairs. And there's me on my last takeoff. Now, like I said, I enjoyed this airplane. I enjoyed it a lot. But time moves on, and I've got my little airplanes I have fun with. And it finally comes down to 0 days to retirement. I'm retired. And one of the things they do is they give you a picture for retirement, and everybody can sign it and say, hey, get out of my seat. I need to upgrade, you old codger and things like that. No, they write very nice notes. So there I am, suffering in retirement. I got my toys. I retired, and I finally got my vet. And, I'll just let you know, I'm going to live to 140 because they say when you get a vet, that's kind of because of a midlife crisis. Well, I got the vet when I was almost 70, so I'm going to live, obviously, to 140 if you give that. And there's my Turbo 310R and my Great Lakes biplane for flying open cockpit aerobatics. But anyway, that's the things that I miss. I miss the people. The layovers were fun, but I didn't miss being jet lagged all the time. But I really miss the people, both the employees and the people that I provided safe transportation to for 36 years, 25 as captain. And now, for fun, I'm telling anybody who is willing to listen about my digressions. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.